In the sweltering heat of Ouagadougou, whispers of an imminent confrontation circled around President Ibrahim Traoré. His trusted advisors huddled in the dimly lit war room beneath the presidential palace. Maps of North Africa and the Middle East spread across the oak table. Reports of secret Israeli operations in the Sahel reached Traoré's ears. Rumors that Mossad agents had infiltrated his fragile alliances and stirred dissent among tribal leaders. Across the Mediterranean, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu studied similar intel in a fortified situation room in Jerusalem. For months, he had feared the growing influence of Traoré's Pan-African movement, a movement that now threatened Israel's strategic interests in the region. For Netanyahu, Traoré wasn't just a regional nuisance. He was a rising symbol of African defiance against foreign interference. Late one humid night, Traoré called for his military chief, Colonel Zongo. "They think we are weak, Zongo," he growled, his voice calm but his eyes blazing. "But we will show Netanyahu what Burkina Faso is made of. Send a coded message to our allies. If Mossad wants a shadow war, we shall give them darkness to drown in." In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu paced in front of an emergency cabinet session. He slammed a file down on the polished table, satellite images of unusual troop movement near Niger's border. "Gentlemen," he barked, "Traoré is provoking us. He thinks he can unite the Sahel and push Israel out. If we don't act now, we lose our leverage over the uranium routes and the Red Sea corridor." While the leaders schemed miles apart, an invisible fuse burned between them. The first sparks had flown. All that was left was to watch which flame would ignite first and which would consume the other. Days after the first coded threats, Traoré sat in a darkened corridor beneath his private residence, waiting for the man he trusted least but needed most, Maurice Sankara, his elusive intelligence chief. Sankara entered silently, wearing a plain khaki jacket, eyes cold as granite. "Tell me you have eyes inside Tel Aviv," Traoré demanded without greeting. "I do," Sankara replied, voice barely above a whisper. "Netanyahu has ordered Mossad to destabilize our trade convoys through Chad. He thinks if he cuts our supply lines, your coalition will crumble." Traoré's fists clenched on the armrest. The weight of his people's survival pressed heavily on his shoulders. He knew that an open declaration of war was suicide, but letting Netanyahu's agents bleed him from the shadows was a slow death he would not accept. Meanwhile, in a private office deep within the Knesset, Netanyahu received an encrypted file on his personal tablet. Inside were intercepted messages. Traoré's forces moving weapons from Mali to Niger, and coded instructions for sympathetic Tuareg warlords. He read them in silence, his reflection in the tablet's glass merging with the shaky satellite images of Sahel deserts. "He's bolder than I thought," Netanyahu muttered. He summoned his national security advisor, Leah Ben David. "Find me a back channel. I want to send Traoré a message. He should understand that if he keeps pushing, we won't just sabotage him, we'll break him." Hours later, an unmarked jet took off from Ben Gurion Airport under false diplomatic clearance. Aboard sat a single figure, Ambassador Eli Cohen, an old fox of Israel's shadow diplomacy. His destination, a discreet airstrip outside Bamako, where Sankara would be waiting. Two rivals had now unleashed a secret envoy each, pawns in a chess game neither was willing to lose. The War of Shadows was no longer rumor, it was alive, creeping beneath Africa's red soil and Israel's armored borders. Ambassador Eli Cohen stepped off the unmarked jet and squinted into the West African dusk. Dust swirled around him as Sankara's men, silent, stone-faced soldiers, flanked him and escorted him to a hidden safe house outside Bamako. Inside, the air was stifling. A single flickering bulb hung from the ceiling as Sankara sat opposite Cohen, a battered briefcase between them. Neither trusted the other, but both knew betrayal could spark an all-out regional conflict neither leader was ready for yet. Cohen slid a slim folder across the table. Sankara flipped it open. It contained intelligence about rebel leaders on Traoré's payroll who were secretly negotiating with European mercenaries. Sankara's eyes narrowed, reading every line twice. "You expect us to believe this?" Sankara asked flatly. "It's real," Cohen said. "A gift from Tel Aviv. We're not here to break Traoré. We're here to remind him who holds the knife behind his back." Sankara leaned in, voice colder than the desert night outside. "If Netanyahu wants peace, he must stop funding breakaway militias in Chad and Niger. No more poison money to buy our men, or this folder will be meaningless when we strike back." Cohen cracked a thin smile. "This is not a threat, Sankara. It's a business arrangement. Traoré calls off his covert uranium deals with Iran, and we'll stop squeezing the Sahel dry. Otherwise, Mossad won't come quietly next time." Outside, Sankara's guards exchanged wary glances as muffled arguments rose inside the safe house. Words twisted into threats, threats into dark promises. Far away in Ouagadougou, Traoré waited by a radio, monitoring coded signals every hour. He trusted Sankara to deliver a message Netanyahu couldn't ignore. But deep in his gut, he knew diplomacy was just the calm before the desert storm. Tonight, two nations danced on the razor's edge, a fragile handshake masking a dagger behind each back. The desert winds carried rumors of betrayals yet to come. Back in Jerusalem, Netanyahu's inner circle gathered around a sealed briefing room. Leah Ben-David laid out the latest intercepts on a digital board. Sankara had not only met Eli Cohen, but had leaked parts of the negotiation to sympathetic journalists in Dakar. Rumors of secret Israeli meddling were now spilling into public discourse, fueling Traoré's image as a fearless defender of African sovereignty. Netanyahu's eyes burned holes through the screen. "Cohen promised silence," he hissed. "Now Traoré looks like a hero fighting the big bad Zionists. Leah, bring Cohen home. If he's compromised, I want his passport shredded and his career buried." Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Traoré addressed a crowd under the blazing noon sun. His voice thundered through battered loudspeakers. "They think they can own our resources. They think they can buy our leaders. Burkina Faso will show the world that Africa kneels to no foreign flag." The crowd erupted in chants of "Traoré, Traoré," a tide of raw anger that his advisors feared might soon overflow into open calls for war. Sankara watched from a balcony, expression unreadable. He knew the leak had been deliberate. The more the people saw Netanyahu as an imperial hand meddling in Sahel affairs, the more they'd rally behind Traoré's fiery vision of unity. But shadows breed shadows. That same night, as the cheering masses slept, a convoy of black SUVs snaked through Ouagadougou's back streets. Inside sat an assassin for hire, known only by a code name whispered in the underworld, the Scorpion. His mission, wired straight from an undisclosed Mossad handler, was brutally simple: silence Sankara. If Traoré's spymaster fell, the fragile web holding this new African alliance would tear apart before it solidified. As the Scorpion loaded his silenced pistol in a candlelit safe house, across town, Sankara stared into his bathroom mirror. His instincts, honed by years of surviving coups and betrayals, prickled at the back of his neck. Somewhere in the labyrinth of Ouagadougou's night, death slithered closer, and silent, patient, lethal, patient. The air in Ouagadougou pulsed with tension as dawn broke. In the inner courtyard of the presidential residence, Sankara performed his morning ritual. Black coffee, one cigarette, and a slow walk under the tamarind trees to clear his mind. This time, though, a shadow waited among the branches. The Scorpion, clad in civilian clothes stolen from a dead street vendor, steadied his pistol behind a crumbling stone wall. He had spent the night tracking Sankara's routines, bribing a kitchen boy for entry points, memorizing every guard rotation. His orders were clear: no witnesses, no traces, and above all, no failure. Sankara paused under a tree, flicked ash from his cigarette, and felt the hair on his neck rise. Years in the intelligence game had taught him to trust that primal warning. Without thinking, he dropped to the ground just as a muffled shot cracked the silence. The bullet punched a hole through the tamarind trunk where his head had been. Instantly, the courtyard erupted. Guards shouted, boots thundered across gravel, and automatic rifles spat fire at shadows behind the wall. The scorpion ducked, rolled, and disappeared through a servant's passage, cursing under his breath. He hadn't missed a target in 5 years, until now. Bleeding from a graze on his shoulder, Sankara barked into a radio, voice ironclad despite the pain. Lock the gates. Find the shooter. No mercy. Word of the attempted assassination spread like wildfire. Traoré, who had been reviewing military deployment maps, stormed into the courtyard, fury painted across his face. He gripped Sankara's good arm, eyes locked on his loyal spymaster. "Who did this?" Traoré demanded. Sankara's lips curled into a thin smile despite the blood on his collar. "Ask Netanyahu. His fingerprints are all over the bullet." Far away in Tel Aviv, Netanyahu sipped bitter coffee while reading an encrypted report. Target failed. Sankara survived. He slammed the cup down so hard the porcelain cracked. His war of shadows was slipping into daylight, and daylight favored Traoré's people-hungry rage. A line had been crossed. Blood had spilled in the heart of Traoré's circle. Now, both leaders knew there was no turning back. The failed hit on Sankara lit a fuse Traoré could no longer hide from his generals. That evening, a crisis council convened in a bunker beneath the presidential palace. The air was thick with anger and the smell of stale sweat as battle-hardened commanders slammed fists on the iron table, demanding revenge. Traoré raised a hand. The room fell silent. His voice, calm but edged like a machete, cut through the tension. Netanyahu drew first blood. From this moment we bleed him back, but in the shadows, on our terms. He turned to Sankara, who sat with his arm bandaged and eyes burning with the cold clarity of a survivor. "Activate the Falcon unit," Traoré ordered. "No flags, no traces. Hit their listening posts in Chad and their informants in Mali, and I want proof delivered to Tel Aviv's doorstep." Across the continent, a network of ex-rebels, hackers, and rogue soldiers received encrypted signals before midnight. By dawn, a series of silent strikes unfolded like ghostly dominoes. A Mossad safehouse in N'Djamena burned to its foundation. An informant's car exploded on a dirt road near Gao. A power outage crippled an Israeli communications hub camouflaged as an NGO office. Meanwhile, Netanyahu watched the reports flood in, each more humiliating than the last. For every covert asset he deployed to the Sahel, Traoré's people struck twice as hard. It was clear now. This was no longer just sabotage. This was open shadow warfare, carried out under a veil of deniability thin enough for the whole world to guess the truth. Leah Ben David confronted Netanyahu in his private residence, her hair disheveled from 3 sleepless nights. "We underestimated him. He's turned every tribe, every black market gunman into his eyes and fists. We can't fight this kind of jungle warfare and keep clean hands." Netanyahu's face, ghost white under the kitchen lamp, hardened with bitter resolve. "Then we stop pretending. No more half measures. Traoré wants to dance in the dark. I'll drag him into the sun and watch his kingdom burn." He made a single call. Deep within Israel's intelligence hierarchy, a black file slid from a vault, a file labeled Operation Iron Mirage. Traoré had forced the game above ground. Now Netanyahu would force him to stand alone. Hidden deep beneath Tel Aviv, a select group of operatives gathered in a secure black room, known only to the highest circle of Israeli intelligence. On the table before them lay the Iron Mirage file, Netanyahu's final answer to Traoré's shadow strikes. The plan was as ruthless as it was elegant. Spread disinformation within Traoré's own ranks, frame his closest allies as traitors, and sow paranoia until his coalition fractured from within. If Traoré trusted no one, he could not fight back. Netanyahu's cold eyes swept across the room. "Gentlemen, we don't kill him. We kill his faith in the men around him." Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Sankara sensed the shift even before the first rumors hit the streets. Fake recordings of generals secretly speaking with European arms dealers began circulating online. Anonymous messages accused Traoré's economic minister of siphoning oil profits to a Swiss account. Overnight, whispers of betrayal crawled through government corridors like venomous snakes. Traoré, for the first time in weeks, sat alone in his private quarters, staring at files Sankara dropped on his desk. The evidence felt so real, so damning. Yet deep down, he knew the fingerprints belonged to Netanyahu's web. Still, suspicion wormed into his mind like termites in dry wood. Outside the palace walls, old enemies smelled blood. A breakaway militia near the Niger border pledged loyalty to an exiled rival, hoping to exploit the chaos. Even Sankara could see that the rumors were working faster than bullets ever could. At dawn, Traoré summoned his inner circle. The room was heavy with dread. He locked eyes with each man, searching for any flicker of guilt. None blinked, but trust was no longer the unbreakable steel it once was. He spoke slowly, voice steady but haunted. "Netanyahu thinks lies will break us. He wants to see me doubt my brothers. I refuse to play by his script." He turned to Sankara. "Prepare a message for the world. I want every radio in Africa to hear it. Burkina Faso bows to no foreign dagger in the dark." But far from Ouagadougou, in a nondescript safe house on the Mediterranean coast, Mossad agents watched the unfolding chaos with quiet satisfaction. Iron Mirage was working, and Netanyahu knew it was only a matter of time before Traoré's paranoia bled into full-scale betrayal. Under a blood-orange dusk sky, Traoré stood before a hastily assembled sea of journalists, soldiers, farmers, and everyday people. Satellite trucks beamed his image across Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. He refused a teleprompter. Every word would come from the fire in his chest. "My brothers and sisters of Africa," he began, voice echoing off the palace walls. "They wish to divide us, with lies, with poisoned money, with assassins lurking in the shadows. But this is our land. This soil is watered by our sweat and guarded by our ancestors' bones. No foreign power will uproot us." Applause thundered through the square. In a hidden control room, Sankara monitored the broadcast feed, catching every subtle glitch that might signal sabotage. He knew Mossad's cyber units would try to cut the stream, but Traoré's tech team had planned redundant uplinks on pirate satellites. Midway through the speech, a sharp crack interrupted the cheers. A sniper's bullet ricocheted off the podium, missing Traoré by inches. Chaos erupted. Bodyguards swarmed him, dragging him behind a bulletproof barricade. The cameras never went dark. Instead of panic, the attack fed the narrative. Millions watching on cell phones and cracked radios saw Traoré stand back up, defiant, a bandage pressed to a grazed temple. Blood smeared his brow, but his voice roared louder than before. "Let them shoot! Let them poison our wells with rumors. I am still here. Burkina Faso is still here. And if Netanyahu wants my head, he must walk through 10 million of my sons and daughters first." In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu watched the live feed on a muted screen in his office. The flickering image of Traoré, battered but unbowed, dancing like an unwelcome ghost in his mind. For a moment, even he felt the gravity of what he had unleashed. Beside him, Leah Ben David whispered, "He's turning every bullet into a crown. The more you strike him, the stronger he becomes." Netanyahu's eyes narrowed, a storm gathering behind them. "Then we stop striking from the shadows. Next time we strike where the whole world can see, and not even his martyrs can save him." The failed sniper attack turned Traoré into an unstoppable legend. Across Africa, radio hosts, social media influencers, and village elders repeated his words like gospel. What Netanyahu intended as psychological warfare backfired. The people now saw every Israeli move as proof of Traoré's prophecy. that foreign hands feared an Africa united under one fearless voice. In Jerusalem, Netanyahu held a stormy emergency session with his war cabinet. The iron Mirage leaks had done their damage, but not enough. His generals pressed for a final option, an overt operation, one so devastating it would shatter Traoré's credibility and break the Sahel's fragile backbone in a single night. An airstrike on a secret weapons convoy, the defense minister proposed, tracing his finger along satellite maps. We leaked that Traoré was smuggling uranium to Iran. International headlines will do the rest. Nobody wants a rogue African nuclear partner. Netanyahu stared at the map, wrestling with the risk. Bombing inside Burkina Faso could ignite a regional war, bring condemnation from even Israel's closest Western allies. But hesitation had only made Traoré bolder. He nodded once. Greenlight it. Call it Operation Desert Spear. Make sure the convoy burns before dawn. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Sankara intercepted chatter of unusual drone activity near the Mali border. He burst into Traoré's office without knocking, sweat dripping from his temple. They're planning a strike. Tonight, they want to paint you as a nuclear arms dealer, Sankara gasped. Traoré slammed his fist on the map table so hard a glass of tea toppled and spilled. Then we make their lie truth for them, he growled. He barked orders. Evacuate the convoy. Fill those trucks with scrap metal and decoys. Let Netanyahu blow up old junk. We'll record every second. Hours later, high above the Sahel dunes, Israeli drones locked onto the fake convoy. A single encrypted command from Tel Aviv gave the final go. Missiles screeched through the desert sky, turning the trucks into fireballs visible for miles. But hidden camera drones launched by Sankara's tech squad caught every detail. Empty trucks, no uranium, no weapons, just burning trash. Within minutes, Sankara's team broadcast the footage worldwide. Israel bombs decoy trucks, exposes its own lie. The world watched in stunned silence. For Traoré, it was a masterstroke. He was now the underdog who tricked a superpower at its own game. For Netanyahu, the shadows had vanished. Now he stood exposed, his credibility battered, his shadow war dragged into merciless daylight. Dawn broke over Ouagadougou, painting the city in streaks of crimson and gold, the same colors that now defined Traoré's battle against Netanyahu. Across Africa, crowds flooded city squares waving hand-painted signs. Burkina Faso stands alone, and no more foreign chains. Inside the presidential bunker, Sankara and Traoré pored over fresh intelligence. Netanyahu's last airstrike had humiliated Israel on the world stage, but Sankara knew wounded lions were most dangerous. "Sir," Sankara said gravely, "Mossad assets in Abidjan report Netanyahu is pushing for direct UN sanctions. He's lobbying European capitals to brand you a nuclear threat anyway. They want to freeze our accounts, choke our trade routes, starve us without firing another missile." Traoré closed his eyes, feeling the weight of a continent pressing down on his shoulders. He thought of the farmers who'd lose grain, the children whose medicine would vanish with the next embargo. Netanyahu's war wasn't guns and bombs anymore. It was the slow strangulation of economic siege. But Traoré had one card left: the hearts of millions, and a truth too bright to bury under lies. That evening, he stood atop a makeshift stage before tens of thousands gathered in the capital's largest square, broadcast to every mobile screen from Dakar to Nairobi. His voice, raw from sleepless nights, rose like thunder. "They want us poor. They want us sick. They want us begging. And yet, we stand, because our freedom cannot be bought or bombed or starved. Netanyahu hears me now. You failed in the shadows, and you will fail in the light." At that very moment, Sankara executed the final stroke. His cyber units released thousands of classified documents showing decades of secret deals between corrupt African politicians and foreign interests, not just Israel, but European and American backers too. The leaks spread like wildfire, Protests erupted in city after city. Old regimes trembled. Traoré's defiance had ignited something bigger than his tiny nation. An African spring reborn from betrayal and shadows. Far away in Tel Aviv, Netanyahu watched grainy footage of Traoré's speech on a muted screen, his advisors silent around him. His shadow war had turned him into the villain of a new African myth. For the first time, he understood. You can crush armies, but you can't bomb a man's dream when a million others carry it forward. As night swallowed Ouagadougou, Traoré stood alone on the palace balcony. Below him, chants rose like a storm. Freedom! Unity! Traoré, he whispered to the wind, a vow only the stars heard. Let the shadows come again. I will always stand in the light. My brothers, my sisters, my children yet unborn. Tonight, you have proven that no empire, no foreign flag, no hidden dagger can chain the heart of Africa. They sent spies into our homes, bullets into our courtyards, lies into our ears. But each wound only fed our courage, each betrayal only sharpened our truth. They called us weak. They called us savages in the desert, too poor to rise, too divided to stand. And yet here we stand, unbroken, unbought, and unafraid. Let the world hear me now. Burkina Faso bows to no king but our ancestors. Our lands will feed our children, not foreign profiteers. Our minerals will build our dreams, not foreign weapons. And our freedom will be guarded by the blood of the brave, not sold for coins behind closed doors. Netanyahu and every power like him must understand. In the Sahel, in the forests, on the rivers, Africa remembers. Africa watches. Africa forgives slowly and forgets nothing. Let them come again with drones or dollars. We will rise again with unity and thunder in our chests. We are the children of the sun and the soil. We are the roar in the storm. And as long as I draw breath, my people will walk in the light, never in the shadows again. May God keep us strong. May history remember tonight. And may the world finally know Africa is awake.